You're listening to Advice from Your Advocates, a show where we provide elder law advice to professionals who work with the elderly and their families.
Welcome back to Advice from Your Advocates. I'm Bob Mannor. I'm a certified elder law attorney in Michigan. And today we have a very interesting guest, Bill Cohen. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Honored to be here. Thank you.
So I've been excited about this podcast and learning more about your advocacy. Bill, just tell us a little bit more about who you are and why you're involved in the dementia space.
Sure. So what I like to say is that if you had asked me about maybe 19, 20 years ago, what was going to transpire with my mom and what the journey I was going to be with her, and I'd be doing what I do today and talking to you today, I'd say you're crazy. Probably couldn't make up that scenario. It's pretty unbelievable. So back in the, I'll tell you a real quick version. My mom was living in Biloxi, Mississippi. I'm not from there. And she lost her home to Katrina. I'll tell you some of the things we saw before and after, some of the things we experienced. But I became her advocate, her primary caregiver, and helping take care of all her different financial, legal, and care issues for approximately 10 years. She passed away about 11 years ago at age 83. And I thought I was going to do more volunteer work. Came across this concept of a caregiving support consultant. Yeah. And so it basically turned my personal loss, my pain, into my passion in my encore career. Now,
you know, it's interesting that you have tied Hurricane Katrina into that. Did your mom experience some memory loss before the hurricane?
That's a great question. We were seeing some things that were concerning. I don't know how much was memory loss, but she was increasingly agitated, paranoid, not taking care of the finances, not taking care of the house. She was in the caregiver role for my late stepfather, who had all kinds of conditions. He was on and off hospice. And we thought, is mom just getting tired? Is she stressed? Is she getting older? Maybe I did take her to a doctor and got her on whatever medication was available at the time. Hasn't changed much.
Right.
And we were thinking if my stepfather passed away or went into a care committee, would mom bounce back? Well, we never got that opportunity, because what did happen in August 2005 on the Gulf Coast, Katrina completely swept away their home down to the foundation in the storm surge. And the trauma of seeing it gone accelerated in it and exacerbated whatever was coming out. We realized later it was Alzheimer's.
So Alzheimer's, I was going to ask you, because I know that's one of the questions I had for you later was the different types of dementia. As you know, dementia is a category of diseases, and it doesn't, too often we get a diagnosis of dementia. And my next question is, okay, great. What type of dementia? And so what they believe is your mom was experiencing Alzheimer's type dementia. Is that right?
Exactly. And I'd like to say that, because when I talk to my clients and I talk to people in support groups, that denial is very normal for a lot of us, whether a person with declining cognitive ability or the caregiver. I'd say I did it twice, and one time was before Katrina, and it's mom will be fine. She's okay. The other time was when she had to go into memory care. Isn't it too soon? Isn't there an intro step? But we looked at the symptoms, the behaviors, the signs of Alzheimer's, like Alzheimer's association, but that was definitely, we didn't need a formal diagnosis and autopsy all the time. We knew what she had.
Yeah, no, I get that. And so for those that aren't as familiar with the concept of dementia, is that we're not always, in fact, basically doctors can't tell us 100% for sure what type of dementia it is until there's an autopsy. So, but we have a pretty good idea, right? There's a pretty good idea based on the symptoms, things like that.
And various tests.
And various tests. I'll tell you my personal stories. When my dad went in for a medical procedure, and I was there all day, and I noticed, this was the first time I noticed it with my mother, that there was a significant deficit in her ability to comprehend what was going on around her. And I talked to my family, like you say, people tend to be in denial. I talked to my family about it, and they're like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine. It's all going to be okay. It was just the stress of the day. I said, I'm not so sure about that, And so I think what you're saying is it's very normal for families to be in a bit of denial about it and not, really try to avoid the acknowledgement of it, sometimes too long.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to be what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm. So I'm originally from New England. Went to school in Boston. Originally from Hartford, mostly vacation from but I still stay out. I'm a New England guy, even though I've been gone for many years. And I had a business degree at Boston University. I
Nice.
ended up in the hotel business, and I was in financial services, and I was working for the state of Oregon. And it sounds like none of them have anything to do with the other, including what I'm doing now. But the common thread is customer service and helping people.
Yeah.
So after mom passed away, and I'd already gotten another business degree, and I dealt with all the legal stuff and the financial stuff and real estate. I thought I was just going to do more volunteer work because a few months after she passed away, I became the facilitator of a group I was attending for a few years. Wasn't expecting that. But I was doing the walk to end Alzheimer's. So I was going to the Capitol and advocating for more research funding, that type of thing. Then I came across this concept of a caregiving support consultant, and I did a lot of research and reached out to everybody I could find in LinkedIn in the industry and made a lot of connections, built my network, and learned a lot. So that's a little over 7 years ago, I started my business. I'm a little different from other practitioners in the industry, which is why a lot of people haven't heard of me or what I do, is that we're close to a lot of things, but we're not that specific thing. Provide advice, support, resources, referrals, help people take care of their loved one, manage the care, practice self-care and preservation or preventive care. And I help put together the team. I put together a plan. I like to say I don't compete with anyone. I collaborate with everyone, including people in your field, because these are all pieces of the puzzle. We don't work in silos. We should be all coordinating. I like to use the term that isn't used in elder law, but it is, or elder care, but in child care is wraparound.
Yeah.
Help get everybody together on the same page to help take care of the loved one who can't take care of themselves, and work that way instead of one person and they take care of the housing and that's all.
Yeah.
I work with people, operators, and that's why part of the reason why I'm a certified senior advisor, the CSA, after my name is we take a holistic approach. We look at that broader perspective and take care of our most vulnerable population, their care, their safety, and being able to age as well as possible. So I like those are people I like to collaborate with too.
I like that. I like the holistic term. It's funny. I use that also. And it's very true about both of our work that both you and I do. It's very holistic, and I always think it's funny because we're both old enough to know that, sometimes that was used as more of a hippie kind of, commune type of a thing. But it's important to note that that is a real thing, that most of the time the experts that you're working with are only looking at that narrow slice. Even lawyers, people, social workers, even discharge planners, they're all looking at that sort of narrow slice, and somebody needs to look at the big picture, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the idea of the holistic concept here. So talk a little bit more about what that means to be a holistic service provider.
Right. Kind of funny you mentioned the kind of a woo-woo hippie thing, is that for a while I was in a group called Holistic Chamber of Commerce, and it was mostly the alternative treatments and practitioners, and this has been a woo, nice people, absolutely. So what I try to do is, and I'm going to give a story. I think it's a good way of illustrating how I can help people, because, and I think you saw that I am also a trained elder mediator, and this was almost a combination of my two hats. So this woman is originally from Portland, but she's living in UK, London, for about 30 years. Her mother is in a care community here in Portland, and she was being neglected by her stepfamily, by the care community. It was reported to Adult Protective Services when it should have been probably the care community that was reported. They wasn't doing the job right. And her own doctor was neglecting her. Make a long story short, is that she found me through the Alzheimer's Association, the daughter. We got together. The mom was stuck in memory care, and she shouldn't have been at that time. And she wasn't getting the care and attention she needed. And so we had meetings that involved all those entities, plus a house call geriatric physician, among other people, the housing person, and of course, the home health care agency as well. And got mom back on track, got her the health, got her the attention we need, and got her out of that memory care unit where she shouldn't have been. Now, make a long story short, I've been working with that family for about 18 months now, and various things have happened as mom has had falls, hip fractures, declining cognitive. But we continue to work in that holistic approach, bringing all the different entities in to make sure that mom is safe and has whatever quality of life as possible for whatever she has left. And I can't count how many times the daughter says, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I wish I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found you." So it's a challenging situation, but very gratifying.
So, in a minute, I want to get back to, you telling about your mom and how you kind of came into this, but I want to go down that path first about, okay, what exactly it is that you do and how do people find you? What's the initial, so I understand why people find me, right? They are often looking for me because they're not sure how they're going to pay for care. They're not sure if they have the right legal documents in place. Now, we do a lot more than that, right? We do advocacy, we do that holistic approach to things, but I understand why there's that motive to say, okay, we're not sure how we're going to handle this financially and legally. Mm-hmm. How do they find you, and what is that sort of initial first step?
Well, I'm going to use your phrase, depends.
Right? That's right? Funny. For those that are listening, that's the classic legal answer. Every lawyer, you can answer any question with, that depends.
Right. And that's one of the things I don't do. I don't practice law. Right. I'm not a financial, I can't give specific financial advice. I do hands-on caregiving. However, I've been through the legal side, keeping mom eligible for Medicaid. I used to be in financial services, so I talk in general. I can help people with their long-term care policy because I can read it and I understand it. And I do companion work. I will spend time with clients, loved ones with dementia, like that woman that's just talking about, go still visit her in the care home. So people either, it's word of mouth. I'm very involved, like my local chamber and other organizations. They can find me on my website. I'm very active on social media, on all platforms, even TikTok. You won't see me dancing, but I do videos there.
That's great. Me too.
So I do videos. Usually, at some point, they will get on my website, or they will have my Calendly to schedule an appointment. Initial conversation, whether it's half hour, I don't care, whatever they need. We'll talk, see what their needs are. Regardless of affordability, I let them know very clearly. I either work on an hourly basis, $75 an hour, or for a minimum of $2. But as we know, dementia in particular is a long-term and very complicated, and sometimes long distance, because families are spread all over the place, like the case I was talking about, which was an extreme. So once they're getting beyond 2 or 3 hours, the monthly approach is better. It's $300 a month, and it gives them about 5-6 hours. And I'm very flexible. I can spend anything. But I try to keep it very affordable.
So that's, interesting that you mentioned the long distance. When you were dealing this with your mom, was it a long distance issue?
Part of it. I almost said depends again. But because
you're able to help people long distance too, right? Like the example
the
you
pandemic made that really explode because people are looking for support everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So the work online as a lot. But I was in Portland. She was in Mississippi with a storm. Then she was evacuated with step family to North Carolina, and then one aunt in Delray Beach before I moved her out here. So yes, I was doing the long distance caregiving, the travel to check in on her occasionally before I moved her out here, which we did before while she was still ambulatory and had enough cognitive ability to go along with the trip.
So I always like to make it clear to our listeners when we have guests, and sometimes they're very interested in saying, oh, I want to, could I work with that person? You can pretty much work with anybody in any area, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, for instance, a woman mostly in New England, but her family is in South Florida, and she's from the Dominican. And
Wow.
actually, in her podcast, she says, we need to talk. My father has dementia. So we're helping that family all over the place as well.
Yeah. So I want to ask you more about your mom because, this is something that's very difficult for families and for people that are experiencing with this with their parents. And it's really easy to gloss over things. You start seeing some red flags, you start seeing some things, and it's just really easy to ignore the problem because it seems that like such an avalanche that might be coming. So tell me a little bit more about you and your mom and what the symptoms were, what the things were that you saw that you realized you had to step in.
Sure. So again, while she was trying to take care of my late stepfather, we saw she was trying to keep him alive. I remember hearing about it when she was pounding on his chest and giving him the nebulizer and the inhaler and all this stuff. So it was really wearing down on her. But as I mentioned, paranoia, agitation. She was originally a professional artist, including printmaking, moved over into collage and other media. And she was also, interestingly, left brain, right brain thing, that she was the person to handle the finances.
All right.
And in the 1980s, in her 60s, she was an early adopter, not just of a computer, but of a Mac, which was very infrequent at that time.
Yeah.
Right? So once she was unable to do those things and do her art as well, these were big reasons for concern. That's why we did get her to a doctor, and we were hoping that she would bounce back, but we didn't get that opportunity. Again, that trauma. And what's the interesting thing is that we usually hear about, and I don't know if you were going to ask about this, but I'd love to talk about it, because the research is coming a long way. We always hear about age, and we hear about genetics, heredity, right? However, no one else in the family has Alzheimer's. Two, she was in her early 70s, about my age, when she first showing signs. And for people who don't know it, Alzheimer's and other dementia frequently will be developing for many years before it even becomes symptomatic.
Right.
And in her case, she's living in an area where toxins, pollution, and chemicals in the air, soil, and water, mold and mildew in that humidity. She used to smoke, barely walk the dog, let alone any other exercise. She's in the caregiving role. She's socially isolated a few miles off the coast. Plus, with her artwork for many years, the intaglio process, she was etching it to metal plates and putting it into an acid bath.
Oh, boy.
She's the poster child. The lesson is that, and the Alzheimer's Association, the research is showing us more and more.
Absolutely.
With lifestyle choices and environment, these are huge factors. And I think it's why we're seeing more early onset, younger people getting close to dementia, not just old people. So
we recently had Dr. Natalie Edmonds on the podcast, and she talked about that studies show that there is a percentage that is almost inevitable, that it's based on genetics. But the much larger percentage is partially based on genetics and then partially based on environmental issues and decisions and lifestyle and things like that. But the largest percentage is actually lifestyle and exercise and exposure to chemicals and things like that. And I found that very interesting, that for those of us that are worried about this and understand the issues, there are ways for us to make it less likely. I've talked to so many people that think that, oh, well, if it happens, it's inevitable. It's not necessarily inevitable. It is for a small percentage of people, but for most of us, there are things that we can do to lessen the likelihood that we're going to experience this type of dementia.
And, I'm sure you know that dementia is not a normal part of aging. It is not inevitable. However, as you get older, your risk level does increase.
Right.
And one of the things, and you could mention this too, you tick off a lot of the boxes, is also getting your sleep, getting a good night's sleep, and clearing that junk out of your brain, the toxin tangles and that type of thing. Very, very important.
I can't tell you. I know. I'll be honest with the audience. I do struggle with sleep. It's one of the things I talk to my clients a lot about, because often what we're seeing is we have a caregiver spouse and then we have a spouse with dementia. Well, what's the problem with that? The caregiver spouse often is not sleeping, that they're worried that they have all the weight of the world on their shoulders, that they're worried about the spouse with dementia getting up in the middle of the night, maybe wandering, things like that, and they're not getting proper sleep. And frankly, that's a recipe for disaster. The statistics tell us that the caregiver spouse is most likely to die first. Well, that's a lot because of sleep, like you mentioned, the lack of sleep, the stress, the pressure that's on them.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard this statistic. It's a rough number, but for dementia caregivers over 70 years of age, about two-thirds predeceased the person they're caring for. Not only is that tragic, but it's preventable. If people would go to their own doctor, get their sleep, eat better, that type of thing.
We had a guest recently that was talking about how they offer therapy services for people with brain injuries and neurodegenerative disease and things like that. And he was talking about how many families become very, secluded when there's a dementia diagnosis. In other words, they maybe they get the diagnosis, maybe they get the right, they go to the right doctors, but then they just kind of go home and just kind of seclude themselves and don't get the therapies that are available, don't get the occupational therapy or the speech therapy or the services for the family that might be available, or things like your services, and that it could not only extend the life of the caregiver spouse, not only extend the life of the spouse with dementia, but give them better quality of life for the time period that they have left. And that many families, I don't know if it's a matter of they're embarrassed or pride or whatever it is, but his experience was that many families choose to just kind of seclude themselves when you get that diagnosis of dementia. And that there's so many things that can make life better for both partners, for the person with dementia, for the spouse, for the family, for the kids, including things like the services that you offer.
And I may be preempting with your questions, I don't know, but like one of the first things people should do. And besides making sure your loved one is safe, it's also making sure all the legal is in place, including power of attorney, advanced directive, as needed wills, trusts, etc. Because if you can't have access to the doctors, if you can't be advocating for your loved one, you're going to be in trouble.
That's a good question. I'll add a little bit to that. So it's almost like you're asking me the question on this. And so there is a thing that a lot of families think, oh, well, in 1990, we went to a lawyer or we downloaded some documents or whatever. And frankly, that's not probably okay. That's not sufficient. When it comes to things like dementia, we have to not only have things up to date and current, but there's some additional language that we need in there. And if we wait too long, and I'll explain that in a second, but if we wait too long, the problem is it could get to the point where they're not legally capacitated to be able to sign new documents. So if you sometimes people say, well, just make sure you have your power of attorney, make sure you have your will, things like that. Problem is, it might not be enough. Not every will is created equal. Not every power of attorney is created equal. And sometimes with dementia, we need to have additional authority, additional language in there. And so many times people think, they're told, oh, you have power of attorney? Okay, great. Well, you might need to update it on the early stages of dementia before it gets to the point where you can't. So specifically, what do I mean by that? There's a thing called extraordinary powers, extra authority. Why do we need extra authority? Well, because the person with dementia is likely going to get to the point where they're not able to authorize or give permission to do the things necessary to protect the family, to protect themselves, to transfer assets, to do things that are going to be able to allow them to qualify for government benefits. And so we need to have that in writing, and we have to have clarity on that. And most lawyers don't include that in your standard power of attorney. Most lawyers don't include that in their standard legal documents because most lawyers have never filed a Medicaid application. They've never filed a veterans benefit application. So I don't mean to, overtake the conversation here, but you brought it up, and I think it's really important that people understand that is a clear issue. It's not just about do you have the documents, but do your documents have the right language in them?
Yeah, that's definitely job 1A, one of the two. And I don't always refer to an elder law attorney because they do specialize in those subject matters. I was going to mention all you were talking about the withdrawing, et cetera. And that's where not only your sleep, but socialization, making sure your eyewear is current, you're getting your hearing aids if you need them, and keeping programmed and charged. Because if you don't, you're just going to withdraw. They're going to withdraw into their own little world, and it just exacerbates the situation, which is very tragic. Because like you said, if you do these things early enough, when you see those first signs, it would be easier to maintain some quality of life for as long as possible. I want to do a quick reference when we're talking about sleep, et cetera, and the burden of the people of the taking care of the loved one, is that I got some studies from a local dispensary about early studies about using CBD and or THC or the person with dementia. And because they were less agitated, et cetera, the caregiver burden was lessened. So it's a win-win both ways.
Yeah.
Plus, that's another thing to look at. You may want to go to your local dispensary. I'm not advocating for anything in particular, but even a little bit of THC along with CBD can help with sleep. So something you may want to check. You have to look at your other medications, of course.
Yeah. So, of course, talk to your doctor on that, right? You'll agree with me on that. Talk to your doctor. But it is one of those things that unfortunately becomes controversial, and maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it's one of those things that, it carries whatever political baggage and whatever else. But the reality is, if this is something that can improve quality of life for our elder population, it's unfortunate that it has this baggage behind it but again, we're not giving medical advice. We're just saying talk to your doctor and maybe incorporate this as part of your plan.
And unfortunately, Big Pharma doesn't have all the answers yet.
Right. So I can't agree with that more. A lot of times the answer for whenever there's two problems. Number one is often the diagnosis is generalized dementia. Well, that doesn't tell us much. Dementia is a category of disease. It doesn't tell us which type of dementia it is. And then secondly, whenever there's this diagnosis of generalized dementia, often it's the standard Aricept, there's the standard drugs, and even the manufacturers of those drugs acknowledge that it only helps a percentage of the people. A lot of people that it doesn't help everybody.
And if those medications have been out on generic for 20 years already.
Yeah.
They haven't come up with anything better, which is quite unfortunate. But it'll provide some temporary relief. That's about it. So I want to go back to something you were just talking about, which is partly catalyst for my doing what I'm doing, is that rightly so, the emphasis on most diseases, cancer, heart, dementia, is on the person with the disease. Because they can't take care of themselves. They may not be able to make their own decision. The problem is, and this is what I found 20 years ago and it hasn't improved much, is who's saying to the caregiver, how are you doing?
Right.
What support and resources do you need? And people feel let down. If they even get a diagnosis, specific or otherwise, they say, where's the plan? Where's the treatment? Where's the pamphlet? And they feel very let down. It has not improved much.
That's a big deal. And frankly, from my perspective and how we work with families is that's the thing that we have to address. When families come to me, a lot of times they're saying, oh, this is about mom or this is about dad. And I say, well, yes, of course, we've got to make sure that we've got a plan for the person that has the dementia or some form of dementia. We also, and just as important, is we have to have a plan for the caregiver spouse, the other spouse. Now, obviously, if it's a single person, sometimes it's the caregiver daughter or the caregiver son or the caregiver grandchild. But the thing is that we have to have a plan for them too, because if they get sick, if they break their hip, if they fall down, if they have a stroke, if they die, the entire plan falls apart. And so it is just as much about the caregivers as it is about the person with dementia. Hey, Bill, tell me a little bit more. I know one of the things that you do is elder mediation. So tell us a little bit more about what elder mediation is and how do you participate in it?
So as many of us know, some families can't even decide on ordering pizza,
Right.
let alone caring for their loved one. They're divided. They may not be all on the same page. Some people may have ulterior motives or other agendas. That's unfortunate. I was lucky. I had very good support from my family. They may have had different opinions, but we all cared about what was going on with my mom. Elder mediation is when families cannot come to an agreement. They're at an impasse, and they need probably an objective or neutral third party to help them keep talking, come to an agreement. I don't make the decision for them. I can't fix the family problems. I'm not a therapist.
Right.
But we will keep talking and try to help them come to that agreement they can all live with. Real quickly, it was with a family of 4 different cities, 3 different states around the Pacific Northwest. They're divided down the middle between the 4 of them about the care and where and how mom will be taken care of. And we got on the calls. I remember one of the siblings said at one point, well, at least we're not yelling at each other. That was a win.
Yeah.
And one of the siblings at one point, the one who hired me, at one point went off camera. He was off mic. He says, I'll be listening. So we kept talking, kept going, came to an agreement. They all together. He wasn't happy about it, about the outcome. But he told me later, you did your job, and gave me a great testimonial. So that kind of situation, and mom is doing well ever since. It's very gratifying. It is a way, with all due respect to your profession, keep out of the courts.
Yeah,
It's not about the attorneys. It's private. And again, it's just with me and them. And I usually will do a group call and then maybe individual conversations, and then come back as a group and try to come to that agreement that they will settle on.
Yeah, which is great. And, I take the position of we're only going to help families that can come to that agreement. I'm not going to get involved in that, court battle where everybody's arguing and who should be guardian and, all of that. I simply will not take those cases. And I know that that's a line in the sand that some people are upset by. But the bottom line is I am best at helping families that are willing to work together. Now, like you, sometimes it doesn't mean that the family all agrees at the, before. We have to have that kind of family meeting where everybody sits down and we all, like you said, sometimes we disagree and disagree to the, that you said the person that hired you wasn't real thrilled with the answer. But if we can commit to a plan, and that's what's important is, allowing the family to get through that, to allowing the family to have that, here's my assumption. My assumption is I at least walk into the meeting with the assumption that the family is all well-intentioned. But they're getting voices from everybody. They're getting voices from culture, from movies, from their barber, from their neighbor, from whoever, telling them that this is the way it should be. When we have a parent in crisis, when we have a parent with dementia, there's lots of people willing to give advice. Some of it's bad advice.
There's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah, and so the idea is that, to come together instead of come together in screaming, come together and say, okay, we've got to look for what's best in this situation, find that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's
in the best interest of their person who needs the care and the attention.
And it's great that you do that because you have an advantage over me in that, we do that also. I have to worry about attorney ethics and conflict of interest. And so as soon as it seems that there's conflict of interest, I have to say, sorry, I can't help you anymore. Where you're able to still talk to the family and try to move forward to a conclusion where they're all going to be in agreement. As soon as somebody says, I'm going to hire a lawyer, or that, we're fighting about this, I have to pretty much shut it down and say, okay, then I'm out because I can't be involved in the conflict of interest. As a non-lawyer, you're able to mediate some of these things in a very positive way.
However, I still have one, as you say, a line in the sand. If everybody does not agree to mediation,
Right.
not going to happen.
Right. Right. Good point. So, another thing that you do, and I think is very interesting and very important, is collaborating to create a care team. Coming up with that whole holistic team to figure out how do we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me more about that.
So, and I gave one example earlier, and it's a real good one. Of course, it again depends upon the situation. Not everything's necessary. They may already have the legal documents in place, but
Right.
wouldn't hurt to have a review. So when I'm talking to people, what are your needs? What are your biggest concerns? I'm looking at who can we bring in to the team to help collaborate and talk about the various issues that's affecting not just the person with dementia or other condition, but also the family. So because everybody's involved, no matter where they are or what they do, how much or how little, they're a caregiver. They're part of the caregiving team, and that can be handling finances. That can be making calls or purchases. That can be coming in for a week and giving respite to the primary caregiver. There's a lot of different ways that can work, and that's what I help them come together. It's not a matter, I'm too far away, I'm too busy, I can't deal with it. No, there aren't always things that you can do.
Well, I've, Bill, this has been great conversation. I really enjoyed it. We're totally on the same page about what needs to be done when a family is dealing with this kind of crisis. I want to ask you one last question that I think is probably one of the most important questions that we can address today, which is the importance of self-care and prevention for the caregivers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I gave an example myself about taking care of myself. So I was working full time. I was talking about like sleep and those type of things.
Yeah.
But I was working full time, 45 minutes south of Portland, while taking care of Mom, who was, when she got out of here, was about a half hour north, and in a unfulfilling job with a, how can I say it, a micromanager, narcissist boss. So boss one hell.
Yeah.
My stress level, my blood pressure was sky high.
Yeah.
And I got counseling. One of the first things I did was get into a support group. I made sure that I got away from my desk and took a walk occasionally. Made sure I was getting my sleep. Those things were very important. One of them was a good example is I first started getting chair massages at work. Then I started getting regular massages, and I realized this is not a luxury. This is a necessity.
Yeah.
And it's continued to this day. It reduces my stress, it's taking care of myself, making sure that even though I don't have my mom's risk factors that I mentioned earlier, I'm very proactive about my health. Because that's very important, because I can't take care of me and my wife if I can't take care of myself.
So you mentioned support groups, Al, for those that are local to our Grand Blanc office. So we have offices in Michigan and Rochester, Grand Blanc, and Brighton. If you're anywhere, within a half-hour drive or so of our Grand Blanc office, we do have a support group now for dementia caregivers, and that's on every third Tuesday. Okay, so you can go to our website to get the details of it. But it is a support group that is through the Alzheimer's Association. And when we talk about the Alzheimer's Association, know that doesn't mean that it has to be Alzheimer's. It's any form of dementia that is the dementia support group.
And many of those support groups are still online and staying that way.
Yeah, so that's another great option. We have an in-person one. Sometimes it's nice. I enjoy having a face-to-face with people. But, there can be real good support for virtual, because sometimes it's really hard to get away when you have somebody that you're caring for 24 hours a day. So know that that's a resource that you can pursue. The Alzheimer's Association has many options and a call number that you can call to get their support and information about support groups that you might be able to.
Right, and there are other places you can check as well by doing a search. But for instance, I do another group that I started about 7 years ago through a nonprofit just north of us in Vancouver, Washington, Clark County, and I did the first one down in the Portland area, and we do those every week. It's every Saturday. It started at the Care Community, which is literally across the street from me. But during the pandemic, of course, we went to Zoom. But people are joining us anywhere from New England to Hawaii. I didn't want to orphan them, So every other week is in person or online. So that I'm
Nice.
actually both people and supporting them, which is very important to me.
Yeah, and that's great. And Bill Cohen, it was great to have you on the podcast. Excellent conversation. I appreciate what you do and the service that you provide to the community. So thank you. And if this is a topic that you found interesting, don't hesitate to subscribe to our podcast. So it's Advice from Your Advocates. You can subscribe at any place that you listen to podcasts. Or you can go to our website at mannorlawgroup.com and you can watch them there or watch them on YouTube. Thank you for joining us, Bill.
Thank you. It was an honor.
And I appreciate everything that you do, and we'll see you next time.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, visit mannorlawgroup.com.